some of the aspects of our casualties and pay respect to all of them for all the conflicts that we've been involved with, voluntarily or involuntarily, and just show respect to those poor souls that made the ultimate sacrifice, and just try to put it in proper context. You'll see there's a display behind you that, I'll start with this, the human toll. What it does, and I have, if anyone wants a copy of this, I have extra copies here. And it just lists all the American conflicts and the casualties. And it kind of puts it, I try to put it in perspective by putting the percentage of the casualties with the percentage as it relates to the population at that time. And then I prepared another column that we can get a sense of loss, I thought, of if that same percentage of loss was related to today's population. So you can get it, so you can really feel it, okay? An example, I just made a couple examples. For example, the Revolutionary War, the War of Independence. There's an estimated 25,000 casualties. The population at that time was such that represented 1% of the population of 13 colonies. If you were to take that 1% and project it to today's population, it would be 3.3 million casualties in today's population. To give you a sense of loss of the Revolutionary War. And that was over a period of 8-9 years, and it's something, we don't think of it in that context. But I want you to realize there was a tremendous loss. It was 1% of the population, which today would be 3.3 million. Another one was the Second World War. There was 485,000 casualties. That's 0.3% of the total population at that time. And using today's population as a comparison, it would be over 1 million casualties in today's population. And one that it has to be noted is the war between the states, or the Civil War. It was almost 2% of the population at that time. That would be equivalent to 6.6 million casualties in that 4 years. So that certainly is the worst war we ever were involved in, and it was Americans against Americans. We wouldn't be the country today without it. Back then it was 35 states, and in 1860, 35 states considered themselves their own countries. It was kind of like Europe. You said, oh, I'm from Virginia, I'm from Virginia. The only reason Robert E. Lee did not accept the position as the commander of the Union Army when it was offered to him was, he says, I'm from Virginia. I can't go against my country, Virginia. That's how it was considered. The states they considered them their own little countries, their own states. Okay, they didn't look at it as a union the way we do today. In fact, there was no federal courts except in Washington. No such thing. That happened after the Civil War. So you get a sense of why did these 13 states separate? They felt, well, they couldn't. They're their own country. If they want to join another confederacy, they can do that. The problem was they didn't have the proper morals to survive it. They did it partly because they wanted to maintain slavery, and that was already becoming outdated. The rest of the world was shunning it, and they didn't have the resources. They didn't have the manpower. They didn't have any of the accoutrements that was needed to win a battle. They were hoping just to wear them down and then be just given their own country. And thank goodness that didn't happen, because the United States, if it ended up breaking where there was 2 countries here, out west would have been another country, and we never would have became the world power that we are today. And you know, where would things have gone with the world conflicts that happened afterwards? I don't know where we'd be today. So I think we're fortunate, I think, that we survived that and the Union stayed together. I just have a few artifacts here that I just wanted to share with everyone, and just to give you a sense of what it was like to be a soldier back then. And this is based on my experience actually doing reenacting for about 10 years, where I could actually, marching around in this wool uniform and 90-degree weather and going for miles and actually being involved in independent command or staged conflicts for the benefit of the spectators. It made me appreciate what they went through, and also made it much easier when I read the history and I read letters. I had a better understanding of what they were trying to say. Certainly don't want to diminish the experiences of real soldiers in real conflict, but it helped me understand it a little bit better. And I just wanted to share a little bit about that with you. You can stop and think, a soldier from 1860 weighed about 140 pounds. That's 100 pounds lighter than me, okay? And they were about 5'6", that was the average. And they carried around this 9-pound rifle, along with all their other equipment. And 9 pounds doesn't sound like a lot. When you're 140 pounds and you carry it constantly, this gets real heavy, okay? But it's something that they had to live with. And there's 9 motions it takes to actually load and fire this rifle. And they were trained to do 3 a minute. So they would make 9 motions every 20 seconds to fire this. And it's just amazing. I don't want to demonstrate that for you here, would blow out your eardrums if I was to actually load this and fire. And it's funny, in reenacting, you certainly don't put real projectiles in there. You do put gunpowder in there, a small amount, not as much that would normally be poured into the boot to actually fire a projectile. And the noise with just the powder is loud, and it would hurt your eardrums to hear. But with a projectile, it's even louder, because now it's forcing something out. And just wanted to share with you, here is what they call a mini ball looks like. It's not really a ball, it's a cone. And why was there so many casualties during that conflict was that the technology of the weaponry far advanced the tactics. They still had the Napoleonic tactics from 1815, where you had to have man-to-man attacks, where they marched shoulder to shoulder, and that worked when you had muskets that were smoothbore, that were not accurate. These were rifled muskets, which were much more accurate. You could pick off somebody 3 football fields away with this weapon. That's how accurate it was. And same thing with the cannon. You could aim a rifled cannon and pick something out a mile away. There's stories of they would recognize that there's a Confederate map maker up on a hill under a tent drawing a map for the general of the battlefield. They would see that through their binoculars, and they'd say, take that guy out. And they actually were able to send a projectile through a rifled cannon and blow them right out of the sea. So they were fairly accurate for its time. And the generals never realized how accurate these muskets were, so they'd send them in as if they were smooth bore, and you can fire at someone with smooth bore 100 feet away and totally miss them, because the bullet would just go off. But here, this was like throwing a football with a spin on it, right to the receiver. So that's what a rifle musket does. And most of the casualties were people dying after they were wounded. And that's because, you can see this is actually a mini ball after it hit something hard. It's so soft that if it hit your bone and flatten out, it would take your bone out of your arm. If it hit me in the arm, it would take a chunk of the bone out. So they didn't have the ability to rebuild that. So amputation, take it off. And then you would die from the infection of the amputation. So it was not very pretty. If you got wounded, chances are you're going to die. And there's stories of people being wounded 6 times and surviving every one of them. I don't know what saved them, quite frankly. But there was, by accident, they learned things. Like, for example, they would sew up a wound with horsehair, okay? And to make the horsehair soft enough to use as thread, they would boil it. And they discovered, oh, every time we boil this, the person doesn't get an infection. And slowly they figured out, oh, if you boil water, it's better for you. You know, and they learned that by accident, okay? But so many people died just from infection. It was pathetic. And we have here today, we have 2 books that Betsy has put together of her family writing letters during the Civil War. It's amazing to read these letters. You know, this is first account of things going on. You've got 2 books here that you guys can take a look at after we're done. And certainly invited to come back anytime and review any of this. But I just wanted to share with you some things very quickly and then move on to Lieutenant Bishop. These are all replicas. The only thing that is authentic from the period is the discolored bullets that I have here that I was able to get at Gettysburg. Everything else is a replica. This is a kepi that the average soldier wore. The average soldier also wore a sack coat. Some of the regiments had dress uniforms they wore into battle. This is what the 6th Wisconsin actually wore. And you have your cartridge pouch, your canteen, your haversack where everything, your cup, your spoon, your plate, your sewing kit, manuals, anything, you kept it here. You also wore, you had a backpack that included a tent, half of a tent. You ever hear that term, the whole shebang?
Yeah.
Well, whole shebang means your partner that shared your pup tent with you, you each had half, he gets killed off. Well, now you take his half, and now you got the whole shebang. That's where that came from, okay? And you wouldn't carry the posts because you'd make them, you'd camp, and you'd make the posts from whatever vegetation you found, and ridge poles, and you'd take these 2 pieces of tent, you'd put them together. And that was what you carried on your back, the half. Feel sorry for the guys that had to carry both halves. I think they partnered up with somebody so they didn't have to carry both halves, but they also had a winter coat if they were fortunate enough. It was called a great coat, very large and heavy. We don't have one here today, but it was similar to this great coat here, which appears to be from the Second World War. It was a time when they felt they had to do this. It was not unlike, and somebody may be old enough to remember, after Pearl Harbor, I have to join the military. I have to go do this. There's younger men that said after 9/11, I have to go join the military. I have to. They felt the same way. They had to do this on both sides. And it was a period of time where honor was extremely important, not unlike today, but very few of those soldiers were ever shot in the back. They would be ashamed. They would be ashamed if they ran. And that's why there were so many casualties. They would march into it as if it was a hailstorm. And there's bullets coming out instead. But I just wanted to share some of this stuff with you. You can certainly look at it after the talk. I can certainly answer any questions you have. I'm going to cut it short now and allow Lieutenant Bishop to come up. And I appreciate your patience. Thank you very much.
This one closer. Thank you. This will give you an idea of our dress, what our fatigues actually look like, and this was basically end of Vietnam era type dress that we had here. This is a collage of pictures, and I will leave it out afterwards too, of different places in Berlin, people I work with, special ops situations also, okay? Sure fine. First of all, I'm Paul Bishop, and it's very nice to have each and every one of you here today. And thank you for inviting me here today to speak on the Berlin Wall. Just wanted to show you something first, too. This is what happens to you 30 years on the police department and being an MP and raising a family. And well, this was actually me at one time.
What the hell happened?
Yeah, what the hell happened? Okay.
Wow.
This is me with, I was 1977 military police with the Berlin Brigade. There, okay? So as you see, something happened to me after a while. The Berlin Wall. Okay, first of all, I have to tell you a couple things in the past here. What got me into the service, first of all, okay? Well, I was attending community college, and I was working like 3 or 4 jobs, and I said, well, there has to be something easier than this than try to go to college. And this was 1974, 75. So I guess I walked over to the recruiting station in Atlantic City, and actually I knocked on the Marines' door, and they were out to lunch. So in the meantime, a former mayor of Atlantic City, he was a recruiter there one time, Bob Levy. He said, son, come on over. And I said, okay. So I'm going inside, and he says, well, what do you want to do? And I said, you know something, I would love to be a police officer. Learn law enforcement, and make that my career. Well, he says, son, he says, this is what we have. He says, if you do, I said, another thing too, sir, I'm working awful hard. I am trying to put myself through college, and it's just really, really, really tough. He says, well, if you do 3 years for us, we will give you 10 years of the GI Bill. I said to myself, that sounds pretty good. I'm sure a lot of us thought like that way. So in the meantime, he says, this is what we have to do. We have to send you up to Philadelphia for a test, physical, take an aptitude test, come down. If so, we will send you to Fort Dix, New Jersey for 2 months, and then you will go to Fort McClellan, Alabama for Military Police Academy. Well, that's how I started my Army career. A couple other things too, which is really funny too. We all remember this. Back in the 1960s, in the morning, as I'm watching Gene London and all the cartoons, just a kid, right? They'd always show this commercial, and it was about Radio Free Europe. And they would show this lonely GI somewhere, I guess in Europe, walking the wall, all by himself, maybe middle of the night, walking the wall. And I always felt compassion for that soldier, when I saw that. I was just a little kid. So little did I know, I'm going to be that soldier 10 years later, walking the wall, okay, that was me, okay. Another very funny story was, there was a wonderful little nun at the Holy Spirit High School, and her name was Sister Magos. And I took German, and every day I went to class, I said, sister, I am never going to need this in my life. I will never need German. I will never need it. She says, Paul, please, someday you may need this. I said, sister, I don't even know why I'm in this class. I don't know. For 2 years I took German. I looked at the clock, okay? Guess where I ended up? The United States military sent me for 3 years. Germany, but not only Germany, but Berlin, okay? All right, so that's my little bit of my history of how, I started out and wanted to join the military. And before I go any farther, I thank goodness for the military. I came out of the military in December '78. I filled out some applications, and I was so fortunate. Absecon gave me a call, and I'm so proud to be a member of this community. Another thing too, this is a collage of different things here. The Berlin Wall went up August 13th, 1961. Okay, what was really sad about this whole entire thing is the four greatest powers: British, the Americans, the French, and the Russians, and we all got together to defeat this dictator named Adolf Hitler. And what really bothered me the most is you get sent over to Berlin and you're working there, right? And now here we are, odds with the Russians who we fought together in order to conquer this dictator, you know? And it was kind of very tough. And also in my background, here's my background. I'm an Irish Jew. I'm an Irish Jew Catholic hillbilly, okay? So, which means my grandmother was a Russian Jew, okay? So it was really kind of, you know, I do favor the Russians, you know, but here, there were times here, I'm over there now, and I'm saying, boy, what are we doing this for? What is this going on for? And you say this to yourself, you know, because we were actually the four strongest powers, and, you know, but as we all know, Berlin, which I have right here, is a map showing you. This is the city of Berlin. And after the war, this is how it was divided up, okay? As you see, the red is East Berlin. That's all Russian, East German. Our side was West Berlin. French sector, British sector, and American sector, okay? So between 1945 to 1961, of course we all know the Cold War. Many tragedies occurred. We weren't getting along with one another, spying, you know, jealous, just you name it. That's what was happening between the Russians and the United States, you know? So another thing was, while this was actually going on, before this wall was built, what was happening was East Germany was noticing something. How come our people are visiting over into the free sector, but nobody's coming back? So in other words, nobody's coming back. So all of a sudden, thousands, you know, hundreds, thousands, okay, are going over, okay? Because what is, I have to tell you something about Berlin. When we arrive in Berlin, they give you a tour. You get to go into East Berlin. They take you on a bus in East Berlin. That's the only time. You get there, and I want to tell you something. One of the pictures here actually shows this was a cathedral in East Berlin when I first got there, and it was still bombed. There were still buildings over there in 1976 that were still looked like World War II. Well, when you went over to our side, we got money poured in, millions of dollars poured in, buildings, beautiful buildings. Now, you know, anything you want, you know, is at your command. Well, do you want to live in this side, or do you want to live over here in this side? Okay, that's your question there, right? Another thing is too, which is really something about East Berlin. You know how we take for granted that we go to a store and everything's there in the department store, okay? Well, I'm watching these people over there. Well, you go over here for your toilet paper. You cross the street, you go for your bread. You go over here, you go for your eggs. You go over here, you go. There was nothing like that. Of course, it's communism. They're living communism, and that was the story over there, you know. And we really, you know, once you see this, and all of a sudden you come over here, I'm sure you don't want to go back, you know. So basically, around that time, the early '60s, that's what was happening. So many people were crossing over. Well, the government, East German government, and the Russians, of course, we have to do something about this. We got to do something about this. So all of a sudden, we're going to build a wall. and they did. And I urge each and every one of you to go see Bridge of Spies. It was a fantastic movie with Tom Hanks. It's about the Gary Powers trade, and I will get into that a little bit later. Right here, surrounded in this yellow here, this yellow area, is the wall, okay? The wall is 93 miles, 155 kilometers, 93 miles wide. The wall, if you see here, here is a buddy of mine standing next to it. It's 12 foot high. The wall was 12 foot high. At the top of the wall, it's like a pipe on top of the wall. So in other words, if I was to try to climb up, I'm not going to get a grasp. I'm not going to be able to grab on and climb over. It's not that easy. It's not going to be. I have to say one thing too, which was a real tragedy too. I'm 19, 20, 21 years old. Anybody ever hear of Checkpoint Charlie? Okay. Checkpoint Charlie, this was the old Checkpoint Charlie up here. And while I was there, they put the new Checkpoint Charlie right here. There was Checkpoint Charlie, Checkpoint Alpha, and Checkpoint Bravo. Charlie was the main crossing over into East Berlin. Many a night I was standing there, many a night we were on guard duty, and I'm watching up there at the tower, and out the tower is the East Germans and Russian border guards with their AK-47s aimed right at me. So as we're standing there with my partner, I'm saying, you know, that guy up there is having a bad day with his wife. We might not be here. You know, so you just never know because what's going on. And I'm telling you, it's as we're standing there, they're whatever they're told to do, they do, But just so many things too. So many things also in this 93 miles of wall. Okay, right here I have a picture of grave markers. If you only knew how many grave markers I saw while being on patrol on the wall and while being on duty, and it was just a shame. And another thing is just think, when that wall went up, life stopped between you and your relatives. So if your relative lived in West Berlin and you lived in East Berlin, it was over, okay? So, I mean, literally over. You could not go through that wall. You could not be a part, you could not affiliate with your relative in any way. Many times, communication was basically, it was sad. People were at the top of the wall and they're communicating maybe two blocks away, or whatever, to the people in East Berlin, okay, with mirrors, with signs, whatever they can to communicate. It wasn't something where you can just call. That didn't work like that. So I felt so bad for these people and their families, and that we saw so much. It was a lot of. But the thing was, if you were allowed to have a family member come over to West Berlin to visit, but just one family member. And God forbid if you stay here, because if you don't come back, guess what's going to happen to your family? You're going to be persecuted, or whatever. You'll end up in the gulag, or whatever the situation is. Okay, so that's the thing. They'll let one of you come over, but that's it. They will not let your entire family, or it's just so many things that we witnessed while we were there, and escapes. Yes, I'm happy to say that there were quite a few escapes through tunnels. Actually, a certain kind of car. It was amazing. They had a car that they made the car so it could actually fit under the blockade. So in other words, I remember being there one day. They rode the car through the checkpoint and made it across. And there was an actual movie made back in the 1980s. And I have to say, I actually witnessed that. 2 o'clock in the morning, they had awakened us, the MPs. And may I say, we had a company of 400 MPs. And they awoken us, and we were able to, we got called out to the Wannsee area. The Wannsee area was a great big forest area here. And it was actually the Wannsee area where we have Freedom Bridge, which you'll see in the Tom Hanks movie. This is actual Freedom Bridge where they did the trades. So 2 o'clock in the morning, we called out there. We arrive, and nobody's saying anything at the moment. We're hearing gunshots in the middle of the night. Turns out that a family, East German family, 4 of them, 4 or 5 of them, got into a balloon. They went up, they flew over the wall. Flew over the wall. I'd say about 4 o'clock in the morning, our MP company found them. They were safe and sound. There were bullet holes in the balloon, but they actually came over and crashed. There was an actual movie about, they did a movie on this, but stuff like that was fascinating, how they escaped. A lot of times, we knew how they escaped, but we were not supposed to say anything. It was not supposed to be in the press, hoping that other people will be able to get over the wall too. So, so many things like that happened. And I look back, I'm 19, 20, 21 years old, and it's just really just fascinating what we saw. And then here's the other side. I actually witnessed death. As you know, the wall, we have the wall here. But on the other side of the wall, okay, there has to be about 100 yards. And within that 100 yards, there's a minefield, there's tank traps, there's other booby traps, there's barbed wire, there's dogs, and the East German guards and the tower, also Russian guards, are told to shoot to kill. And I have to say, I'm sorry to say, but I witnessed that, and it was a shame. Not once, but twice. The people being killed, trying for freedom, and it was really sad. Very, very sad to think, oh my goodness, here in 1977, 1978, this is going on so much, you know. And just a very, very, very sad thing. But the people, I felt good. We felt good. Troop strength. Let me tell you, troop strength. I would say we had about 30,000 Americans. We had about maybe 25,000 British, and probably maybe about 15,000 French. We also had 2 airports. We had Tempelhof. Tempelhof Airport was captured after World War II. That was our huge airport. And as you know, anybody here, the Berlin airlift? Okay, what a fantastic thing, the Berlin airlift. Okay, when Russia was putting a boycott, not letting us get in any way, shape, or form, and we nonstop flew stuff into Berlin. And little did they know that it was so successful that they just completely gave up and opened up everything. In order to get into Berlin for us, there was the Autobahn, which from Helmstedt, Germany, we had 3 checkpoints. We had checkpoint Charlie, which was in the city. We had checkpoint Alpha, which was when you got to West Berlin, and we had checkpoint Bravo. Checkpoint Bravo, as you know, the free zone, or I said West Germany, was 110 miles to Berlin. There were, of course, 2 ways we can get there. Okay, you can go by car, which was controlled, the Autobahn was controlled by the Russians and East Germans for 110 miles. Of course, we could travel on it. And then there was something I did for 2 years too, on and off also. I rode the rails. And they're called the Berlin Duty Train. And there was 2 of them every night. Two trains, one would leave for Bremerhaven, one would leave for Frankfurt. For the first, it was about an 8-hour trip. And would you believe, for 110 miles, we were pulled. Our trains were pulled by an East German locomotive. East German locomotive would pull our trains through the east. When we got to Helmstedt, Germany, they would trade engines, and we would go into the West Germany. We had freight trains, we had passenger trains. A lot of times I had to do either the freights or the passengers through there. What was something about that is that we a train crew, which I have here, some train members. It was lieutenant or captain. It was a train conductor, which was a sergeant. It was 2 MPs, and it was a radio operator. And we would transport, and the thing was, the most important thing is the responsibility we had to that train. The train could be, we could have 100, then we could have 1,000 people on that train from Berlin. And that was our responsibility to make sure it was secure, make sure we got them there safe. And there's a place called Marienborn, Germany. It was in East Germany. Our trains had to stop at night. It would stop, and an interpreter would be on our train also, with the train commander, an MP. We'd go in right to the Russians. Russian would be sitting there, and he'd be checking our documents. This document right here is an actual flag order, which we had to have filled out. Everybody's name, okay, who you were, with your ID card or passport, okay? We brought that to the Russian officer, and he would be there stamping each and every one of them. And this is something too we brought in there. Another way which we could get through. Also, in the meantime, while we were inside there, our MPs on the train, okay, the Russians would like to trade at the time. So I always felt that the Russian officer was always taking his time so he could trade. We would trade things with the Russians. So in the meantime, this is what we traded for. Actual Russian belts, okay? We would trade, I'll tell you, I traded up to Oreo cookies. I mean, stuff that they didn't have, okay? Oreo cookies, potato chips, whatever, okay? In the meantime, that was kind of our détente. The train would stop, and we'd be standing there. One of us would be in, one would be a train. And in other words, the Russian would stop him. He'd open his coat up. What do you want? In other words, what do you want, okay? Or what do you want, okay? So these were very, very valuable because everyone knew that we traded with Russians, okay? And everybody wanted one of these, okay? So this is actually a Russian belt. It's got to be 30-something years old now, okay? Who I actually traded with one of the Russians, okay? It's just so that was kind of our détente a little bit, you know, and it was really something. It was just something that we did, you know. Just to let you know a little bit, this here, if you wondered what we actually wore when we patrolled the wall, I found this guy here, sir. This is a actual leftover here, I guess, from the Vietnam War. We still wore the green fatigues, okay? We carried the 45, okay? We carried our knife, you know, pistol belt, whatever, ammo pouch, first aid pouch, and the M16. And this was actually the dress we wore when we went around the wall and patrolled the wall. As we all know, two favorite statements came out of the Berlin Wall. The first one, as we all know, was "Ich bin ein Berliner," right? And well, who said that? Kennedy, okay? And the other one was, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Okay, so there we have a Democrat and there we have a Republican, okay? Working together, okay? I mean, it was fantastic, you know? And it was, I was very, very happy. I wish I could have been there when that wall went down, but it was just, it was it really made me very, very happy inside because of the fact that I knew the persecution that was going on over there, what people were enduring, what we had to do over there too. And so the wall came down in 1989, and my unit, the 287th MP Company, in other words, was ended. The troops were ended. They brought in 1994. All this was over with. You know, by 1994, our company was disbanded and it had moved to Kansas. Okay, a couple other things just to show you real quick here. These are actual East German guards and Russian guards. These were reconnaissance pictures I had taken many, many years ago. I was on reconnaissance one day, And said before, this is what it looks like over. This is what they wore, AK-47s. Okay, this was Freedom Bridge. This was the bridge, and you'll see this in the Tom Hanks movie. It was the actual picture, Freedom Bridge, where I actually witnessed. I stood for two trades of. I don't know who they are. They would tell us, say 2 o'clock in the morning. They'd suit us up, bring us up there. The lights would go on. 1,000 Russians, a couple hundred of us. Lights would go on, and there we'd see people walking over. I think one night we sent 3 over. They sent 2. Another night we sent 1 over, and they sent 2 over, something like that. And we were always told, do not, and I repeat, do not say anything whatsoever what you saw. And we all know that about being in the service. When they tell you to do that, you don't say that, you know? And I said before, I hope you get a chance to take a look at this. This was our outfit. This was my MP uniform. I donated it to the Fort Eustis Transportation Division because they had a couple of our trains down there now. If you ever get a chance, Fort Eustis, Virginia, if you want to see anything whatsoever, it has to do with vehicles. It has to do with vehicles with the United States Army or anything with transportation. It's fantastic. I recommend it highly. They let you in there, they let you in there free of charge. No other thing, no other problem. And just one other thing I'm very, very proud of, I wanted to show you. And this is something that we received. Something that we received at the end of our tour of duty in Berlin. And it was an honorary, with the company, the 287th MP Company, Berlin, an honorary member for the rest of your life, so until the company falls. But technically, the company has moved to Kansas now, but still is the 287th. But it's a really nice honor to serve with the United States Army. It was a real nice honor to be in Berlin, of all places. And I never thought in a million years that I would witness what I would see in the history that I was at. And just imagine, it was once the headquarters of Adolf Hitler, and then it was the Berlin, ended up being the Berlin confrontation. Okay, and it's just really amazing, All right. Is there any questions, Frank? Anybody have a question or anything? Thank you. Yeah.
Have you been back to Berlin since then?
You know something, I haven't, and with the wife and 2 kids in college, I'm not in Berlin, but I would love to. And I have to tell you a quick story. I'm taking your time here, but it's a real funny. Communism at its best, right? Over in East Berlin, okay, they built. Where's that picture at? They built a tower. Okay, right here. They built a tower right here. I think it's called the Funkton Tower, something like that. Okay. Now, the funniest thing is about this tower is, of course, East Berlin was communist, and we were democratic, so we were democracy, right? So here on the top of this ball here, this tower, this communications tower, right? Every time the sun would come out, it would form the most perfect cross you ever saw in your life, okay? So we called that the Pope's curse, okay, the Pope's curse, okay? And the East Germans must have painted that 10 different kinds of color. Every time they painted it, guess what? The cross of the sun would be there, So it's just really made, so I know that they were always upset when they would hear that, the Pope's curse, of course being a communist country, But it was very true. And if you ever see, please bring that up on the computer and take a look at it and a little closer, and you will see what the sun did with the way it is, perfect cross. You couldn't ask for anything more. So I thank you all, and thank you all for your time, and I hope I was able to educate you a little better. Thank you.
When did you leave?
Excuse me?
When did you leave Berlin?
Oh, I was there from April of 1976 till December of 1978. and I was very.
You're a baby.
But the best thing ever happened to me was within 3 weeks I was working for the city of Absecon. So I couldn't ask for anything more. That was the best thing ever happened to me. Okay, thank you.
And you married my daughter.
And he's my father-in-law.
Oh, you poor guy.
That's actually what happened to me. Knowing him after all these years, that's what actually happened then. Good night. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
You're up, Bill. Do you need me to do anything? This is Bill Hoch. He is our gatekeeper at the desk to make sure everyone signs in. One of our best volunteers, and he is a U.S. veteran, and he is a wonderful person. And I want you to know he's here to tell a story of his experience as a veteran, and definitely speak about his brothers that served. And I think you'll find it very interesting.
The check is in the mail.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you very much for coming out. And I want to thank our speakers. And what I'm going to talk about is rather personal, my family. But with all due respect to all the men and women who served in our country, I salute them. And none of us want to forget the personal sacrifice that they gave us. Now, I'm a brother of 4 brothers. Pardon me. This is my oldest brother, August. This is the next one, Elwell, Arthur, and yours truly. August, all of my brothers, including myself, are a product of the Depression era. And I say that because the Depression really left a mark on our lives, as well as many of you folks' lives, that we will always remember. And my brothers, my older brothers, to get employment was next to zero. So many of them, when they left school, or maybe they quit school, they would join the service, hoping that they would pick up a skill of some sort to be employed when they come home. And that was my 2 oldest brothers. August, he served as backup for the Morels Marauders. Now, the Morels Marauders was one of the crack infantry outfits in the Army for World War II in the Pacific. They were mostly serving in Burma, which was really not too nice. And my brother, as a result of being there and in the conditions that he was experiencing, come out with what they call jungle rot, which was on his legs. And he had that to deal with from the time he was just a teenager till he passed away. I will say this, that my brother passed away in the Veterans Home in Vineland. And there was a Philippine doctor there who actually cured my brother after he experienced all of this condition all of his life. For the last 5 years of his life, his legs were cured. However, in the interim time, he had to put up with that all of his life. And he received many decorations for his bravery and activity in this crack infantry outfit. The infantry badge, which was one of the hardest badges to attain, you really had to be in the worst conditions of the war. My brother experienced a lot of terrible memories, and when he returned, just like today, with our young people returning from the wars. He had an awful lot on his mind. And really, they didn't, in World War II, they did not focus on treating the soldiers for this condition. They called it battle fatigue. Today they have all kinds of abbreviations for it, PSS and blah, blah, blah. But he received no treatment at all. And it made a hardship for him to find happiness again, like he had before he went to war. And when he returned home, I was a young man. I was about, when they were returning from the war, I was about 15, 16. I remember so vividly him in unpacking his duffel bag in our kitchen and crying at everything he took out of it. This is what these men experienced, and it was very sad and very hard on my parents. Well, Gus survived all of that, and he lived to be 77 years old, and he passed away at the Vineland Memorial Home. Now this is my brother Joe, and he, the Japanese were very, very bad to our men. And they had this walk on Bataan and Corregidor. It was the Death March, they called it, because I think something like 3,000 of the men died. They were either murdered because they weren't strong enough to make the walk, or they were shot by or stabbed by the Japanese. Then, after the men that survived this terrible walk, and I have talked with some who survived and come home and told my parents face to face of the atrocities. They were put on a hell ship, they called it. It was just a barge, and they put all these men in the hull of this, and there was no facilities, and they were packed in there like sardines. Now I got this first-hand information with someone who survived it. And when he was talking to us, he said, you know, I remember your brother Joe. He says, when we were all in the darkness in the hull of that ship, he says, well now guys, we can't laugh like this anymore. Ha ha ha. We're gonna have to laugh. Oh ho ho. We can't clap like this. We're gonna have to clap like that. He says he always kept a sense of humor through the entire ordeal. Well, in this ship, they took them to Moncton, Manchuria, and that was the prison camp. And of course, the Red Cross, they sent some communications, but I just feel that they were censored. I'll say that. They were really censored of the conditions of the camp. And as a result, my brother, who was 21 years old, he died on his 21st birthday, of starvation and dysentery in that prison camp. And he was a physical education teacher, and he was 6'2", and I mean he was a very strong, healthy man, young man. And of course, it overpowered him, and he passed away. Well, he was buried at Moncton, Manchuria, and the government sent my parents a letter and said, do you want your son to remain there, or do you want to bring his remains home? And my parents decided to bring his remains home because we had a family plot here in Mays Landing. And it was somewhat comforting, especially to my mother. So the same train rail out of Atlantic City that he left in 1939, he returned in 1945 in a box with a guard. And he was home one day, we were getting ready for his burial, and a knock come on our door. And here was the soldier standing there, and he introduced himself. And he says, I buried your son in Moncton, Manchuria. And he says, we gave him the most respectful burial we were allowed to do. And he says, I just had to come to tell you some stories about Joe, which really was very comforting because we heard it from this young man who survived all of the atrocities. Later, there was a directive put out and a booklet telling all of these atrocities and the way that the Japanese had tortured these prisoners. And you see, propaganda was so fat then that people would believe it. But here they sent this to all people, my mother and father, who, believe you me, they were passing away in inches since to think that their son passed away like that. And we brought him home, and the city of Atlantic City, out of respect, shut down for the day, and we had an enormous tribute to Joe. And he is now with the family up in Mace Landing. Then this is Arthur. Arthur had to ask my parents. He left school. He wanted to get in. He was very patriotic. He wanted to get into the action. So he wanted to join the Navy. And he was only, I think, 17 years old. And the only way they would accept him is that if my mother and father would sign up for him to go. And he had it on his mind to try and get to the South Pacific where my brother was held prisoner and see him for the first time. Of course, the communication between us was not good because of the war. Technology had not advanced to the point that today this morning I talked to my grandson in China, but it wasn't like that then. There wasn't any of these wonderful communications available. So, Arthur, on the ship, and we got this firsthand, he was a gunner. And they were attacked one night, and he didn't have time to put his shoes on. And as a result, the deck of the ship became so hot that it gave him a permanent injury of his feet for the rest of his life. But he was a decorated naval gunner and a real tough guy. He was we used to call him the freckle-faced redhead Irishman. And he was a tough guy. When he hit you, it was like a piece of concrete hitting you. And then, of course, he was able to come home and marry and have a family, and he passed away very young. He was only 52. But that is for Arthur. As well as myself, I was the baby of the family. And I was home most of the time during World War II, and I would certainly wait for the letters from my brothers, and really I kept on top of what was happening with them and their units. And then I got drafted, and I had already started a nice job with the Atlantic City Electric Company, and I went up for the examination under great protest. I'll be very, very truthful about this. And I did not pass the physical examination. And the man that I worked for when I come home and told him I was 4F, he says, "What? Why, you're the specimen of health. Why, I don't understand it." And he went out in the office and said, "You know, that kid in there, he didn't pass the physical." It made me feel so bad, I wanted to quit. So I got beyond that first draft. And then the Korean War broke out. And I was called again. And my mother said to me, God bless her, "You won't pass the physical, don't worry about it, Bill." Well, 2 years later, I come home and I says, "Mom, here I am. Where have you been?" But as far as my service is concerned, I was never in combat. That is in the field. However, I got into the intelligence end of the United States Army, and I was approved for a very high intelligence approval, and I had some real experiences right here in the United States. Because, you know, the communists at that time were infiltrating all of our camps and putting all kinds of communistic publications in the day rooms, and they had an awful lot of young men who were supposed to be old-fashioned, good, patriotic Americans. They were in there doing their job for the Russians. And I was caught one time by one of them, and one of them tried to run over me with a truck. And at the end of my career, which I cannot talk about because I was sworn to secrecy, I couldn't receive a medal. So they gave me, the Brigadier General Loyal M. Haynes, presented me with a certificate of achievement, of which I am very, very proud of. And there is so much more that I could tell you about my three brothers, who I am so proud of. And I do this to keep their memory alive, as well as millions of other soldiers, men and women, who have given the supreme sacrifice and brilliant combat years. And I thank each and every one of you for coming here today and supporting our program. Thank you.
I want to add something.
Yes.
I came a little late, and I don't know what he said, your first speaker said about his entrance into service.
Yes.
But welcome to another 4F member. Can I tell my story?
Absolutely.
Very short. I was in college. I was my third year, first year of advanced ROTC training. But my local draft board rated me 4F because I had been a sick kid all my life. Asthma, heart problems, heart lung, everything. And my mother knew I was not going to get into service. And when I came into school, they called up my ROTC unit. So I and only 2 or 3 other guys were left in the tremendous place we used to practice. And I go up to the colonel one day and I said, "Sir, you got to get me into service. Give me a job in New York." I'm a New Yorker, you can tell. I'll take any job, you know, but just get me into uniform in the service. Because I used to wear my uniform, the ROTC uniform, to school every day. We only needed it 1 day a week, but I wore it every day so that my neighbors thought I was in service. I go to the colonel, I said, "You got to get me in." He says, "I can't do that." "Please. I'm in terrible straits." "Okay." He said, "Just a minute, what's the problem?" I said, "I can't get a date with a girl on campus. No girl wants to go out with me." And at that time, my father was in the automobile business, and we had ration stamps for gas, so I had a car. So I was a good date. No girl would go with me. He listened to me, he laughed, he says, "Just a minute, sit down." Picks up the phone, he calls Governor's Island, which was headquarters for New York. And he says, "Frank, I'm sending a young man down to see you. He wants you to examine him. And he's a young fellow we need desperately, so see what you can do to get him, to help us, to get him in." So I go down to Governor's Island the next day, and I walk into an office which is twice the size of this. Guy sitting at a big fat desk, and he says, "Walk up and down this hall for me, would you please?" I walk up and down, he says, "Take a seat. You look pretty good, how do you feel?" I said, "Fine." 1A. That's how I got in.
Yes, there was
And some of the stories that you tell, that you think about,
yeah,
are some good, some bad.
that's right.
I was in infantry. I went through officer candidate school in Fort Benning and got sent over to Germany. I walked across Germany into Czechoslovakia when the war ended. And then I stayed for a year in the occupation zone. So I saw most of what you saw. We were trying to take a town. We come out of a forest, and right in front of me is an open field with grass about a foot high. And there's a town ahead of us, two houses on either side of the road. Both have machine guns in the upper windows. And they open up on my men, and they all go to the ground. Nobody wants to move. I can't get anybody to move. I'm lying in the roadway. There's a ditch beside. I roll into a ditch. There's a French tank next to me. He's supposed to be my support. He backs up. Okay, so I can't get anybody to move. A Jeep, after about 15, 20 minutes, nobody makes a move. A Jeep drives up the road, and the guy gets out and he walks over to me, and he's a general. This is General Patton. I recognize him right away. And he looks down at me, and he's standing, okay? And there are two machine guns that are raking the field in front of me, all right? And he says, "What's holding you up, son?" I was, I think, 20 at the time, or 21. I said, "There's two machine guns up at those buildings up there." He said, "Well, you know what we do here." And he takes out his map and he says, "Every morning before we left, we'd have a meeting of all the officers, and he'd say, 'We are here now. By 5 o'clock today, I expect you all to be here.' And he says, 'And if one of you doesn't move up in time, there are 3 groups moving at one time. You open the flank of the man behind you, beside you, and he's in terrible shape. So you got to keep a straight line as you move up.'" He said, "You got to be here at 5 o'clock, son." I said, "Would you please get down?" I said, "It's going to get hit." Machine gun fire from the, didn't touch him. Turns around and walks back to the Jeep, and he stands up in the Jeep and drives back. Idiot should have been shot during the war, not after the war.
You're not the one he socked, are you?
Pardon?
You're not the one he socked in the face, are you?
No.
Yeah, that was quite a story.
Yeah.
That hit the headlines when that happened. But you know, anything can happen unexpectedly. And boy, did I find that out.
Yep.
And I tell you, I had many situations where I could not believe
That's right.
would fabricate
The
and
only
come to
plus
fruition.
that I then eventually ended up with, I was stationed in Würzburg running a railroad. When I joined the occupation army, they put me in a railroad operation. And I lived in Würzburg and ran a circle around there. Within that circle was Nuremberg. And every Saturday I used to go down and attend the Nuremberg trials.
Oh boy.
That was a remain in my memory.
Oh, what an experience that must have been.
Mhm.
Yes, definitely. Well, again, I thank you all for coming, and
And I came from Atlantic City.
the rolling city there, yes, sir. And I was raised in Atlantic City.
And I was too.
I thought you left.
Oh, what? I was just starting your car up.
Yeah.
That's why I said you were a baby before.
We're gonna be here till 2 o'clock. Please, if you have time, stick around, look at the exhibits, and we'll try to answer any questions you guys may have. Thank you all for coming, and give a hand to our